And ladies and gentlemen, I am back, Coach Gene Clemens, joining you here as always. Talk Spicy. Thank you for hanging out. Um, I am joined by a guy I met years ago, a guy that I was introduced to through, I believe it was through a good friend of mine, Emery Hunt, whom I seem to either introduce to a bunch of people or whom I get introduced to a bunch of people through. But um, in having a conversation with this gentleman, he just seemed like a really like quality individual, like a quality dude, and he was a sponge. He wanted to know. He wasn't coming in with any like, I know more than you, or I'm here to big boss you, or I'm here to kind of prove you wrong. A lot of the stuff that we see in the business now. But it was really just like, hey, let's talk. Let's talk some ball. Let's get the film out. Let's see what the film says, and let's look at things from the film's perspective and let the film talk. I always appreciate that because that's how I get down with any medium that I'm on when it comes to sports and sports evaluation. Um, I am joined by none other than the RSP's own Matt Waldman. Matt, thank you for joining me.
Hey, Coach, it's a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. It's always fun for us to be able to, chop it up together. And I think it was Emery that introduced us, which was very cool. And we've done some shows together. I know on your platforms and mine, and I feel exactly the same way. It's just been fun for us to be able to have conversations and learn from one another.
Yeah, I think the one of the first big things we did is we talked about we talked about Baker Mayfield, and I think
Yeah.
at the time it spawned from probably a social media conversation that was going on where I was one of them people that was like, I don't know about this Baker Mayfield. You guys are saying is like all that,
Yeah.
and you reached out, and you said, hey, I'd love to be able to look at the film and give me and other people the understanding of why you feel that way. And we compared him versus, I believe it was Boykin, right?
Yeah.
We were talking about him versus Boykin, and what we thought Boykin actually did, or what I thought Boykin actually did better
Yeah.
than Baker Mayfield, even though Baker Mayfield was this guy who was the Heisman Trophy winner and a guy who a lot of people thought was going to be a first round pick, and Boykin was a guy that nobody thought was going to be drafted. And it ended up playing out that way, right? Like it
Sure.
ended up playing out that way, but we saw skills that you could see were kind of lacking in what Baker was able to do as a quarterback, and it up and bit him. The exact stuff that we were talking about on the film came back and bit him as a pro, right? And I just remember sitting there having a conversation with you because it wasn't on some, oh, let me prove him wrong. It was really like we were both coming to the realization, oh wow,
Yeah.
we found a market inequality. We found
Yeah.
a something that just didn't fit right.
One of the great lessons that I learned from Baker Mayfield and from watching Baker Mayfield and when we watched him together is that you know people love to talk about the analytics of accuracy, and like you're going to hear about heat maps with Drake May. And one of the things that I've mentioned to people is that accuracy, like box score accuracy, is not necessarily passing accuracy, and that unless you're rigorously charting how how a quarterback throws the ball, and whether it's pinpoint accuracy in a sense of projecting towards what the NFL is going to be looking for, and whether you're projecting whether he made the decision in a timely manner, which is the level of processing that you need, that the NFL in its infancy is just beginning to realize, but doesn't know how to apply. I've joked, Gene, since we've last talked, that NFL quarterbacking is a stage performance medium, and they see it still as a science, and they're trying to quantify everything, but they don't realize that really the elements that go into stage performance are very similar to the elements that go into quarterbacking, because you have scientific aspects, technical, conceptual, all physical things, athletic things, but you have to integrate all that. You got to deliver it with the speed of accuracy in a manner that, I joke that Alex Smith would be like the comedy writer who maybe he delivers great material, but somebody else needs to tell the joke and perform it, or else they need a laugh track for his stuff. Whereas, like, you could say Brett Favre, in contrast, maybe he did nothing but tell fart jokes, but his would land because he had good timing. Like, he had the timing, and like all good comedians, you're gonna bomb a lot. I mean, Dave Chappelle, Richard Pryor, Robin Williams, probably count up how many jokes they had that weren't funny on a special, and you'd realize that that's a tough gig. The amount they landed, though, had the gravity that made them superstars and Hall of Famers in what they do. And I think that that's kind of the same thing with quarterbacking. With Baker Mayfield, you could see against man coverage, he was always a beat or two late, even if he was box score accurate.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that I like about the RSP, and congratulations. How many years is this now for the rookie scouting portfolio?
For publication, it's been 19 now, and actually preparing for one, it's been 20. So that next year will be number 20.
Dang, well, that is a feat within itself. We you obviously, I know how difficult it is to put something like that together. A lot of people might think that you do it for money, but it really is a labor of love. And if you happen to get a little dollars from it, then great. But it's probably something even before the the 20 years that you've been doing it, that you probably had notes all around that rolled into a rookie scouting portfolio. I remember talking to Emery about one of the reasons he started doing the draft guide is that he was like, well, I've always been doing a draft guide. I've just been doing it for me. And instead of having people always ask me the question of, oh, well, why do you have this person there, or what your thought is about this, I just decided I was going to, let people in on all of these notes that I've had for years. He had these notebooks just full of handwritten, evals that he had done on hundreds upon, well, thousands and now of players. And so to see him transition that into what it is now, and to see you continuing to, you know, expand as the landscape is shifting, right, right underneath your feet. How has that been, trying to navigate how the landscape of how we consume this type of product?
It's been funny because, you know, I I started a little bit differently than Emery, because for me, I was a writer, and then before that, in the past life, I was an operations manager and a quality control director, and so I had learned all these process improvement methods for how do you evaluate performance, and got these certifications and industry best practices. And one day, I was listening to Gil Brandt talk about Brian Westbrook, and how if he were taller, a little heavier, he would be a first top 5 overall pick rather than maybe a second round pick. And I thought about that, and I realized, I know the business of how this works, and like there's a business to it, and probably with more of an SH to it, like a business more than there is like than just, there's some weird things that go on behind all that. So I knew that from the corporate experience that Brian Westbrook was a top 5 talent, but he didn't have all the bullet points that we're going to cover a team's assets, because what they're really looking for in a first round pick is ability to explain to the public and to the media and to anybody else that they're worried about that this guy was worth it. Because if they miss on an undersized, twice injured kid who had his scholarship revoked at Florida State due to injury before he ever got on there at Villanova, and he didn't pan out, and they've spent first round on him, they knew that wasn't going to fly, compared to if they spent first round on a kid who went to Stanford and had all the yardage, no know, the physical prototypes, all of that. So, for me, it was about seeing if the process I had learned, I could apply it to studying football and continue to learn the game. And through that kind of helped me get in contact with coaches and scouts and analytics people with scouting backgrounds and playing backgrounds, and having conversations, and it kind of growing from there. And then just, when you start your own businesses, it's kind of the Wild West. So you're always trying to learn things like video editing and doing that kind of work. Now you get into podcasting, and for me, the RSP was always like, I knew I wasn't going to be any good at design. I was a journalist, but I wasn't going to try and do design. So I was like, I'm going to make this as basic as it can be. I want it to look like something you found in a file cabinet and then you read it. So what's changed for me probably is that I would say that it's been more than anything, one thing to stay the same, I will say first, is that just staying true to yourself and staying true to the work. And what was your mission? It was like, I want to make this the best quality thing I can make it in terms about football, and continue to learn about the game and apply that to what I'm doing. And my kind of audience will find that. And if they like it, they're going to stick around, because that's really what this is about. Is like, I'm not trying to get numbers to sell. If it's good enough, it'll come, because those people will be raving fans. And that's kind of what's happened. But, I've had to grow in finding my audience and doing the social media stuff and doing that kind of work. And then really what's come to me through that is wide receiver coaches, who I've had on shows. And because you're doing stuff like that, they're like, hey, I've got Drew Lieberman, who's assistant wide receiver coach at Rutgers, who's worked with guys like Edelman and Mohamed Sanu and Dontavian Wicks. I've learned a ton from them, and I've been able to like apply that. All that's, you can see on behind me, there's a blackboard back here and half of it was like, actually the whole thing was covered in what ultimately was criteria I used. And I credit Drew Lieberman, him and Jay Norvell, for his book and spending time to revamp what I do. So really a lot of it is, it's kind of cyclical. It kind of helps. And, one thing that you start doing to promote yourself, if your mission's the same, which is I'm trying to learn, then you encounter people who you go, this I can apply to my work. And then you credit those people. They want to come on your show. They want to do work with you. They want to keep doing, so it's a weird evolution in that sense. I mean, it's like I went from being basically a fantasy football hobbyist and a magazine writer with some management experience to being someone who's doing this and, getting a chance to work with some quarterback coaches and, who've worked with Anthony Richardson and Brock Purdy, and getting a chance to supply my scouting reports. I mean, and a lot of it's with getting the chance to work with folks like you along the way, where I get to learn from doing shows and, and we have an exchange of ideas and being able to just, it's all grist for the mill.
So one of the things that we learn in coaching, one of the things that we learn in football is there's nothing new under the sun. Everything is recycled, everything is stolen, everything is borrowed, whatever, and we repackage it. We put our own little zest, our own little seasoning on it, but it's still the same thing. Like I love this Inside Zone duo conversation. Like, to me, that's hilarious. Inside Zone, duo, split zone. I'm like, it's all just the same thing. Like, depending upon what the defense does in front of you, it's going to dictate how it looks, right? Isn't that the entire point of the concept? And so the fact that you've leaned into and you let it be known immediately, like, hey, none of this is stuff that I invented or I came up with. This is stuff that people who understand, who know the business, who know what they're looking at, have told me these are the things that you look for. Do you think that's why you've had so much success in this space as opposed to a lot of other guys that may have come from your background where it wasn't like I've been working in sports this entire time type of background where they try to like get into the space and then act as an authority, and people are looking at them like, you don't
Yeah.
really look like you know what you're talking about. Like, or, hey, how are you so sure? How do you talk in such absolutes,
Yeah.
when it comes to these things? Do you think it's just been your openness about how you've obtained this information that's allowed you to grow?
I hope so. I think that's generally how I tried to look at it, and I think that if I brought anything different to the table, it was different from an NFL, from a football perspective, but not in a life perspective. It was
Mm-hmm.
just barn. It's just like you look at and I'm not comparing myself to Patrick Mahomes. Let's before we even go there, but in a very small window, you look at Patrick Mahomes and people like it's not going to work, and if you look at him, you go, he's just playing. He's just taking what he learned as a shortstop and he's applying it to football. And he's got a good trainer who actually is reinforcing that he doesn't get hurt doing it, so that he's strong enough to continually do what he's doing. But I mean, we used to talk about quarterbacks as point guards when they started distributing the ball in a different manner. It's just borrowing from what you learned in life. So, like, I learned all the football stuff I learned from football people for sure. The things that maybe in how I communicate it comes from being a writer. It came from being a performance musician. It came from working in corporate America. And so then I would have, because the people who were football people would contact me and say, listen, I'd had somebody who's a subscriber since 2007 who was a DB for in Division One. He was a scout for 4 teams. He had gotten his degrees in masters in stats and biomechanics, and he worked for more than a dozen teams, in the NFL doing what he did in scouting analytics. And he said, he contacted me in 2011 and said, I've been getting your book since 2007. And I thought you worked in the league because of what you knew about behind the curtain that most NFL types writers say they do, but have no clue. And I was like, I just guessed, honestly. Like, I was saying, and I would say it when I would write, I would say, this is my estimation. I may be wrong. But this was, and he goes, no, he goes, I realized that you didn't work in corporate America. I mean, that you didn't work here. He said that you worked in corporate America. And I said, that's where I got it. I was like, they put on organizational management is the same across all bounds. So where dysfunction is, if you've experienced the dysfunction, you're going to see it in the NFL. So my point being is yeah, I learned from a variety, and it's just, again, being open to that. You don't know everything. You're going to learn, you're going to fail, and you're going to take chances. I think the thing that Emery and I both have in common, as both people who do draft guides, is that we don't really care. We care about being right, but we care about being right from the standpoint of right about seeing the football player for who he is, not whether or not he gets drafted in the first round or whether or not he has a great career. I mean, that's nice and it's icing on the cake, and it's what gets you some props from people and people to want to maybe buy your work. But I think more than anything, it's about, did we see that player truthfully? Did we see him accurately? And are we learning something from that? And do we follow our true north for our compass? Because I don't, I had somebody who is high in this industry, and I'm not going to say who, but somebody I worked with at one time who was like, who I have a lot of respect for what they do, but they were like, it's not about being right. It's not about being right. It's about being entertaining. And I thought, nope, that's not my true north. That's theirs. And that's okay in what they want to do. I hopefully can be entertaining, but more than anything, I want to try and be right from the standpoint of learning the game and learning what I do. And I think that just shines through with how you go about doing it. Just like I think that one of the things that shine through with you over the years is that you've always been a truth teller, and you've always not been afraid to just be forthright about what you think, and you're not trying to be conflict oriented with it. You're just trying to tell people what you think and how it is, and you're more than willing to listen to somebody tell you what they think it is and how it is, and then you just go about your day, which is like you're just real, and that's, I think people recognize real, and most people appreciate it, though sometimes people don't. And those are, some folks who don't appreciate the real, they come at you, but that's okay. That's just a validation for really where you're trying to head.
I appreciate that love. I receive it. I'm trying to get better about receiving praise. I know it's weird because I consider myself to be an extremely confident person, but I don't receive praise well. And I think a lot of us don't actually. I think it's a natural thing that a lot of us find it difficult to receive praise because we don't look at anything that we're doing as revolutionary. We just
Yeah.
look at it as, okay, well, this is just kind of how it is. But the one thing I do remember, I heard someone say, and I don't know if they were just being nice or whatever, but they said that I was everyone's favorite follow on Twitter's favorite follow.
Yeah.
Because my following's not, I'm not out here with 20 and 40,000 followers or 100,000 followers, but my, whatever it is right now, 1,000 plus almost 2,000 followers, they're all people that are in the industry. Like,
Yep.
I don't like the people who I engage with, they're usually people who are in the industry.
Yeah.
Whether they like me or not, like they we hang out, we talk. But I've always been good with the back and forth with the conversation that could sometimes sound or be read or teeter on argument. And I think that argument gets a bad rep because of the connotation of what we see when we think of an
Yeah.
argument, but what we're really just talking about is someone's point, right?
Yep.
Like that's basic.
That's how you learn.
Exactly. So, if you can't give me a strong argument, then why should I listen to it, right? And so if you don't have any passion behind your argument, why should I listen to it? If you don't have any logic behind your argument, why should I listen to it? If there are not other people who can corroborate or share your argument, then why should I listen to it? It's your basic um ethos, pathos, logos in writing and in the art of rhetorical,
Yeah.
you know.
I'll give you a great example. You and I had the last time we had an argument online, and it was about Trey Lance.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And what we learned from that conversation, what I learned was that you are invested, you are more invested in the kid and the person in terms of where they're going. And it's understandable. You're a coach. You have an investment and you want to see you. For me, like, I care about the person on an abstract level of, like, I don't want to see anything go bad for them, but
Mhm.
I'm thinking more from the standpoint of, like, what could this kid do or not do, um, and what do they bring to the table, and what they have if things work out in their favor. And it's a little drier. And what I think that one of the things that I learned is that for you it was more like, okay, yeah, but the way the system's set up and the way that these kids get blown up on media doing stuff on Twitter like I do, or like Emery does, or somebody else, you know, it puts these kids at risk maybe a little too early, and it can be damaging to them early on in terms of the outcome of where their career is. Now, we're still rooting for Trey Lance in Dallas, and hopefully things work out for him long term. But if we were to say, what you were worried about, I think was absolutely on point. Because, even if you look at Shanahan and say, well, maybe there was a disconnect between GM and coach about who they really wanted, and whether coach wanted to give that a chance or not with Trey Lance, and whether he got a full chance, or whether he was just not quite ready yet with the lack of playing time, to your point, you know? And on top of it, what that might have done to him psychically a little bit. It may not be permanent, but it is certainly something that's forced him to sit and go, okay, there needs to be time for him behind the scenes for a while, because he didn't have much playing time at North Dakota State in terms of like what you normally see.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I like about what you do is that you don't try to stay heavy in waters that you don't feel comfortable swimming in, right?
Yeah.
Like it. Listen, we talk. We don't talk a lot of linemen play when I'm talking with you, because that's not your passion. That's not your love language. You appreciate the position. You'll talk about the position if someone wants to talk about it, but that's not where the focus is, right?
No, that's not. I spent enough time on those four that I know, and the way that I wanted to spend time on it, I knew that the others aren't my lane. Maybe when I retire from everything, maybe I'll get into that, and then I can tell someone, well, I'm working on that. In 5 years, I can talk to you about that, like I was able to talk about receivers 15 years ago, something like that.
So, tell people where they can pick up or subscribe to the RSP, and where they can follow you and everything that you're doing. And by the way, I've loved how you're using TikTok. I love how you're using it. I've watched you get more into that, into that atmosphere of the short form, video, using it as a quick eval on people. I really do like what you're doing. It reminds me of what I was doing back in the Vine days, when I was doing the quick little 15-second pop-ups on the Vine. I like what you're doing. I wanted to let you know that, because
appreciate it.
I think that people, when they're venturing into new lanes, into new mediums, that they need to know that what they're doing is actually having the effect that they're hoping that it's having. So tell everybody where they can find your stuff before I start giving you more props and all that.
MattWaldman.com is where you can get the rookie scouting portfolio. It's a pre-draft, post-draft publication. It's 1,183 pages in length on these four positions. It's in a PDF format. It's all bookmarked. So think of it as like a choose your own adventure. If you want to see scouting reports, you can check that out. If you want to see just rankings, you can check that out. If you want to see my process for how I get into all this, including the glossary of terms and all that, that's in there too. The post drafts more for fantasy people. I'm also a senior staff writer, football guys. I've been writing about fantasy football since 2003. So I give you a post draft version. So that way it doesn't cloud how I view my pre-draft. So if I think Dylan Johnson is a top 5 talent as a running back in terms of what he has to offer, if the landing spot's good, I'm not going to say I'm putting him at 20, because it's most likely, based on the tea leaves of the NFL, that he's not going to get drafted and he's going to have to work his way up. No, I want you to know, I think this guy's number 5. So then after the draft, then I can say, okay, here's the pragmatic view for all you fantasy people out there of how that works. So you can get that there. My YouTube channel is Matt Waldman's RSP Film Room, where you'll find podcasts, long form and short form videos on how I scout these 4 positions.
And I appreciate you, as always. Appreciate you coming on. Look forward to talking more as we get closer to the draft and we start to tune out all of the BS that we hear about. People. I'd love to have you back on, and I might reach out to get you back on next week, because I want to have a talk about the idea of this media scouting and people ranking players based off of where they think they're going to go, instead of ranking them based off of where they believe they are talent.
Yes, because evaluation and valuation are 2 different things, and I don't think the analytics folks really fully understand that, and the ones that do are tired of trying to explain it to them.
Well, I knew that it would be a great topic for you because of your background in the business world and understanding the difference between the two, but I just don't have enough time to flesh it all out right now. But definitely, once again, Matt Waldman, the RSP, follow him on X at Matt Waldman. That's 2 T's, Waldman, and check him out. Give him a follow. go in and check out the rookie scouting portfolio. Subscribe to that. Go subscribe to the YouTube channel. Everything he does is above board. He wants you to know where it comes